So, IGN just dropped an article titled, "This really feels like a beta test." And yeah, they're talking about the brand new free-to-play Pokémon Champions that just hit the Switch 2. And honestly, dude, it's looking like the absolute definition of the "we have Pokémon at home" meme. Like, how do you take the single most profitable entertainment franchise on the entire planet and push out something that feels like it was cobbled together over a weekend by a couple of college interns? But hey, if you're as tired as I am of massive publishers treating us like unpaid QA testers, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button so we can keep calling out this slop. Because let's be real here for a second, we just got shiny new hardware with the Switch 2, and somehow Pokémon Champions is still suffering from massive performance issues. Like, you'd think the extra graphical horsepower would finally let the developers put out a game that doesn't run like stop motion claymation. But no, we're getting the exact same sluggish 30 frames per second gameplay and fuzzy menu icons. But the absolute funniest part is this bug where if you boot the game up docked on the Switch 2, the resolution is literally cut in half. You have to physically pick up your console, undock it, and then redock it just to get the game to run at 4K. And you have to do this every single time you boot it up. I honestly didn't even have this surprised Pikachu face when I saw this, because we've went through this exact same exhausting song and dance with Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. IGN literally called Scarlet and Violet the worst running AAA game they ever played on the Switch. It was a complete technical dumpster fire, and now they're bringing the exact same lack of optimization here to the brand new Switch 2. It just proves that hardware isn't the problem here, it's the sheer refusal of these developers to optimize their own code. And it's not just the performance that's dragging this thing down into the dirt. The fans are rightfully roasting Pokémon Champions over its glaring lack of basic features. IGN put out a video discussing how the game, quote, has potential after a disappointing start. But like, honestly, I'm so sick and tired of playing potential. I don't want to play a roadmap. I don't want to play a promise of a good game a year from now. At launch, Champions is an online-only multiplayer game. There's absolutely no local wireless play, which is insane for a Pokemon game. And you have to manually add players instead of just switching to your Switch friends list. When a game launches, even if it's free to play, it should have basic quality of life features implemented on day one. But that's become the new industry standard for live service games. Just look at what Warner Brothers did with Multiverses. The game had a massive year-long open beta, took the game offline for almost another year to switch over to Unreal Engine 5, and then finally launched with fewer features than the beta originally had. They literally didn't have time to add back basic stuff like end-of-game stats or co-op versus AI. Like, how do you relaunch a game and actively remove the best parts of it? Pokémon Champions feels like it's pulling the exact same stunt here, shoving a half-baked product out the door and telling gamers, don't worry, we'll patch the rest of the game in later while you buy our premium battle passes. Then there's the incredibly limited roster. You boot up a new Pokemon game expecting to catch, well, a ton of Pokemon, but fans are pointing out that there are only 185 Pokemon species available to use out of more than like 1,000 that exist. That's less Pokemon than we had in Pokemon Stadium 2 back on the Nintendo 64. But because this is a free-to-play live service trap, they intentionally hold back the actual content so they can drip feed it to you over the next 5 years. They give you the absolute scraps at launch and lock the fan favorites behind future updates. It's the exact same predatory playbook Blizzard used when they forced everyone over to Overwatch 2. They promised us this massive game-changing PvE hero mode with talent trees and deep story missions to justify deleting the original Overwatch game. And what happened? They completely scrapped it and doubled down on selling expensive cosmetic skins. Gamers were so furious that they review bombed Overwatch 2 on Steam until it became the worst user-reviewed game on the entire platform. These massive studios rely entirely on brand loyalty to get away with stripping the content bare and charging you a premium to get it back. And of course, because Pokémon Champions is tied to this always online ecosystem, you're completely at the mercy of their servers. You don't actually own the game, you're just renting server space until Nintendo decides decides it isn't profitable anymore. And if the servers are broken on launch day, well, you're just staring at a menu screen. It reminds me of the absolute disaster class that was Payday 3's launch. Starbreeze Studios hyped up Payday 3 for a decade, and when it finally dropped, the third-party matchmaking software completely imploded on itself. Players were sitting in lobbies for hours, unable to play a heist game, unable to play a single game. Even if they just wanted to play completely solo with bots, they couldn't, because, well, apparently it's tied to the same servers. Payday 3's player count plummeted so hard that a month after launch, its 10-year-old predecessor Payday 2 literally had 10 times as many players online. If you force your game to be an always online live service experience, you better make sure it actually works. It just feels like the bigger the publisher, the more disconnected they are from reality. The executives sitting in their fancy boardrooms genuinely believe that because their company logo is on the box, gamers will blindly eat whatever slop they serve up. It's exactly what Ubisoft did with Skull and Bones. They spent over a decade sucking development hell, building a pirate game that was originally supposed to be a Black Flag expansion, and when they finally pushed out this barren, repetitive live service shell of a game, the Ubisoft CEO literally looked investors in the eye and called it a quadruple A game, to justify charging $70 for it. A quadruple A game, dude. The Reddit communities were absolutely roasting the guy, saying that the 4 A's stood for the amount of IQ points you need to actually buy the game. The absolute ego on these corporate suits is staggering. They hype up a mediocre product, milk the die-hard fans, watch the player count die off, and then act shocked when nobody wants to buy their battle passes. Because it's like poetry, it rhymes. They never actually learn from their mistakes, they just find new ways to overpromise and underdeliver. And the sheer irony of all this Pokémon Champions drama is that we literally saw an indie studio beat the Pokémon company at their own game. Seriously, dude, look at Palworld. A relatively unknown Japanese developer named Pocketpair looked at what Pokemon fans had been begging for over a decade, a massive open-world survival game where you can actually interact with the monsters, build bases, and explore without constant hand-holding, and they just made it. And what happened? Palworld completely shattered industry records. They recently announced that they crossed 32 million players across PC and consoles. They hit over 2 million concurrent players on Steam alone. They didn't even have the backing of a multi-billion-dollar anime and merchandise empire. They didn't have decades of brand nostalgia. They just made a fun video game that gave people what they wanted. And how did Nintendo respond? Instead of looking at Palworld's success and saying, wow, we should innovate our games, they just slapped Pocketpair with a massive patent infringement lawsuit. They would rather spend millions of dollars suing the competition than actually put in the effort making a Pokemon game that doesn't feel like a broken beta test. If a smaller studio can drop a monster catching game that runs better, plays better, and respect the player's time infinitely more than the official product, then there is absolutely no excuse for the state of Pokémon Champions. But as long as gamers keep rewarding these massive publishers for doing the bare minimum, they're gonna keep giving us the bare minimum. They know the Pokemon name alone will get millions of downloads, so they don't even bother finishing the game before they shove it back onto the digital stores. I'm just hoping that enough fans actually vote with their wallets and their playtime this time around, because until Nintendo and the Pokemon Company actually feel it in their profits, nothing is gonna change. Anyway guys, I'm gonna go boot up my PC and play some actual finished products. This is RageWatch and I'm out. Thanks for watching.